This may come as a surprise to you, but I play other games other than Destiny. In fact, I grew up as a squeaker on Call of Duty, and it's from these types of games that I learned something about how the controls are laid out in Destiny. Destiny is interesting when it comes to key bindings and setups. Bungie seems to default to favoring accessibility and ease of use over functionality. What I mean by that is just like how the QWERTY keyboard was designed around slowing down typewriters so you didn't accidentally get a jam, your controls are also chosen to make it as easy as possible for a new player to understand, which is great for like the first 6 months of playing. Then some of the flaws of this controller layout becomes very apparent. So here are 9 settings that should help you become just slightly better at Destiny. Please note that everyone is different, and these will be by their nature different than what you are already using. So if you are completely 110% satisfied with your button layout, I won't be offended if you click off this video right now. Also, I'm talking controller layouts here, but that doesn't mean the ideology can't be immediately translated over into a mouse and keyboard. Good? All right, let's ditch this very obvious CGP gray ripoff. Let's start with some more common settings changes and work our way to the more savant and unusual. Number 1, change your crouch button to R3. Unless your controller is set up in such a way that you can use one of your triggers or bumpers to crouch, most controller schemes require you to take your thumb off of the arguably most important button on this hunk of silicon and plastic to do something like a slide, or if you're a real tryhard, Timmy, crouch spam. It doesn't make any sense for a higher skilled player to reserve one of the most accessible buttons in the game to highlight players. In fact, who even highlights players? I can't say I have ever done it, nor have I ever seen someone highlight a player before. This change removes that moment of monkey brain reaction speed and coordination to make it as quick as possible for you to get down on it. And that can be the difference between life and death. Number 2, lower your ADS modifier. Regardless of what FOV you play on, of which there are plenty of great videos out there, you should probably lower your ADS sensitivity to be at least slightly lower than what it is by default, which is 1.0. The reason for this is just like how your brain has to send a signal to your thumb to change over to the crouch button, so too does your brain have to read and adjust on a hair trigger to enemy movements. This can be a problem regardless if you are holding a mouse or thumbing a stick, if your sensitivity is too quick for you to make the micro adjustments necessary to line up your shot or control recoil. This was one of those settings that will be dependent on playstyle, however, so longer range players will likely need a slightly lower ADS modifier, whereas more aggressive players will need it to be closer to its default depending on what you're doing, because they need to be able to whip it around in tight places in order to stay alive, and you don't need that much accuracy, you just need to put it roughly on their center of mass. Just remember that there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and if anybody says otherwise, they are looking for clicks, run away. Number 3, swap your aim and shoot buttons from L2 R2 or LT R2 if you're on Xbox to your top bumpers. Your most dexterous finger is not your middle finger. Unless it is, then I guess get ready to ignore me. Why, oh why, would you place your aim and shoot buttons underneath a trigger that uses it? Using a music analogy, if I needed to press a scale of 5 keys, would I place my hand here, where I have to move my hand to hit the last key, or here, where all the keys are under a finger? By making your aim and shoot button to your top bumpers, that frees up your middle fingers on both hands to cover what for me is my melee and grenade without having to take that millisecond to move my dominant finger up and down. Yes, this is an extremely small and minute change, but why not give yourself that extra millisecond advantage? Number 4, change your emote buttons to hold instead of press. This is mostly for reasons that will make more sense later, but for the same reason we want our important actions on quick and readily available buttons, we want our least needed actions to be more deliberate and less likely to get pressed in the heat of combat. Again, we have another change coming up that will make this one make more sense, so please bear with me. Number 5, change circle to an uncharged melee. While this doesn't need necessarily to be the circle button or the B button for Xbox players specifically, I recommend that you at least make one of your buttons manually bound to an uncharged melee. And because we just moved 80% of people's crouch buttons off of the circle, why not put it here? Having an unbound melee gives you more options to deal with close range attackers, as well as allowing you to, if you're using the newly released Strand, manually do that little swipe through the air to give yourself that little extra bit of momentum, of which it does not do by the default auto melee. Sometimes it might not be worth using up your melee charge on a low health enemy, or Maybe you've gotten used to the muscle memory of shotgun melee, but you keep accidentally tossing away your charged melee, and this might help you. Yes, you do have to take your thumb off of your aiming stick to make this happen, but unlike sliding or crouching, your basic right hook to the chin requires no added precision and often will track things that you're not even looking at. Number 6, on that same line of thinking, assign something to charged melee. This is particularly useful for ranged melee such as throwing knife, because sometimes you actually will need your charged melee in a range where the game will want to use your punch by default on the auto melee. I set mine to something somewhat obscure, but the more I study my time interacting with this layout, the more I am thinking it would be better to simply unbind my auto melee altogether and replace it with a charged melee by default. In the words of Mr. Winton from Overwatch, further experimentation is required. For now, I can at least attest to the value of having something set in that charged melee override, even if it's not ideal ergonomically. Number 7, if you've gotten this far, subscribe. It means a lot to me. Okay, anyway. Number 7, change your alt fire from hold reload to tap your emote button. For us controller plebs who don't have 100+ keyboards at our disposal, the small amount of delay between the press and the game registering it as a held action is extremely frustrating. In fact, back in my days as a Terrible user, I would very often find myself wanting to swap to Ravenous Beast after it was charged in a dangerous and fast-paced encounter, only to watch in horror as the game thought I had asked for a normal reload instead, because they're bound to the same button. This simple swap is game-changing for certain builds, and it's why we wanted to assign our emotes to the longer press action from earlier. This is actually very similar to how a lot of other games do alternate fire or different fire rate type changes. Like in Call of Duty, you can go from fully automatic to semi-automatic, but now, with Destiny, we don't need to press, hold, and pray for our alt fire. We can simply press. Number 8, change your Icarus dash to a held press of your jump button. If you've ever seen a Warlock Icarus skate, you can see there is a timing window of chaining a burst into that Icarus dash that gives you a massive boost in speed and momentum. Getting this timing window to happen on the default controller can still require more brain effort, even if it is relatively simple. By making your jump and Icarus dash to the same button, but then binding Icarus dash specifically to the hold, you can get a perfect Icarus skate just by pressing one button. Just run, jump, and then hold down that same button to glide and perfectly time an Icarus dash every single time. The power of a clever controller change, you just performed a short-range Icarus skate like a pro. Number 9, bind your finishers to left pad. The same idea from our alt change fire from before. Why not make your finisher, an integral part to certain builds, into something more consistent and deliberate? Same thing, you don't need precision just like your melee charges, but you don't want to have to press, wait, hold, and pray. Regardless of what you decided today, I hope you at least gave your controller layout a bit more thought. If you have a good idea for some type of controller scheme, please leave it in the comments down below. Let's help each other out. Bless your faces and deuces.